Musket Man, and I am back for episode 17 of Gun Table Talk. And today I got a very interesting gun that I wanted to show you that actually has very big sentimental value to me, and what really pushed me over the edge truly into more black powder firearms. And that is the Griswold and Gunnison Cap and Ball Revolver by Navy Arms Co. So anyway, guys, thanks for joining me in another episode. Let's continue Gun Table Talk. So anyway, guys, I'm going to be more going over the gun itself and not so much the history. I actually do not know very much about the history of Griswold and Gunnison. So what little history I know, I'll go over. And if any of y'all know more, please let me know in the comments. Also, this video will make its way to YouTube, but it's going to be a little bit. I still have my other Gun Table Talk videos I have to edit and get on YouTube first before this one. So it might be a month or two before you see this on YouTube. But you'll get to see it here first on Instagram. So that'll be for later. So anyway, what history I do know about the Griswold and Gunnison? Well, back in the Civil War, this was considered the rebel pistol, similar to the LeMat. Even though it was designed in France, it was still the Confederate pistol. So as that time, you know, there was Colt, Remington had made their way, and they were the big guys in the multi-shot revolver weapons industry. So by the Civil War, the Confederacy needed a handgun. So they had the LeMat, but they needed something else. So they basically came up with the Griswold and Gunnison. And as you can see, compared to my other cap and ball revolvers, this is a brass frame. This is not a steel frame revolver. And the reason that is because the South did not have the industry that the North did. So for the South, it was cheaper to make brass frames for the guns and then keep the steel to the barrel and cylinder versus making it all steel. It was more expensive to produce. So they had to do something cheaper. So they were known to melt down bells or anything that was brass to make these guns and other guns as well. So that was a cheaper option, as you can see. That's about all I know history-wise. That's me not doing any research on the Griswold Gunnison because I really just wanted to go over the gun itself. So that's about all I know when it comes to the Griswold Gunnison. It is a 44 like the 1860 Army, or it's very similar to the 1851 Navy fantasy gun that was also 44. So it's a similar caliber to those back in the day. But anyway, this particular pistol was the cap and ball revolver that truly got me in further to black powder guns and cap and ball revolver guns. So my grandfather got me this particular gun probably 9 years ago. It was the first cap and ball revolver I ever got. I was still young and new to the black powder world and didn't even know a black powder revolver existed. At that time, I had inline muzzleloaders and one percussion one by tradition. So I didn't even know this existed. The only revolvers I knew were like ones I saw in the Wild West movies that took a cartridge and all that. So I didn't know anything about it. And we got it for a good price. My grandpa wanted to get it for me. He got it for me at the gun show, took it home. And that's where I truly started learning all the information and the need to know for cap and ball revolvers. So as you can see on this, there's some difference in bluing on the barrel and cylinder and some of the parts, the color case hardening on the loading lever and the hammer as well. So I'm going to go over what happened, a little bit of my history with the gun. So with it being Navy Arms Co., the quality's not quite as good as Pieta, Uberti, second gen Colts, and other companies that make cap and ball revolvers too. So it's not quite up there. In fact, Navy Arms Co. has been out of business for over 20 years now. But this was a great starting gun. So I shot this all the time. Like that's back when I didn't even know you really had to truly clean these to get them to work. So that's when I figured all that information out and truly got started. So what happened was we were out on the range shooting one day with my buddy. And what happened was I had a chain fire. It's still to this day the only time I've experienced a chain fire. So we fired it. Everybody was okay. My buddy was like, "Did you fire twice?" I said, "No, I didn't." Went to cock the next chamber. Click. Chamber was empty. Cap was gone. It chain fired. Well, I took it home and cleaned it. Sat for a couple weeks. Next time I took it back out to go shoot it. Well, what I didn't know was what happened is the frame had fractured when that chain fire went off. So the next shot I fired, it went boom, barrel and cylinder fell off the frame because it just broke. The cylinder pin, is, I know that's not the proper terminology, but that's what I'm going to say, had fractured off from the rest of the frame, ruining the gun. So my grandpa only paid like $150, so I wasn't torn up about it. In fact, it was kind of funny. My buddy was with me at the same time, and even he laughed. In fact, he was the one that shot it. So anyway, what I did was go, well, I'll throw away the frame because you can't really fix that unless you're a high-up, experienced gunsmith, and that's going to cost a lot of money. So I just disassembled it. Just kept the parts. I'll keep the cylinder, I'll keep the barrel, keep all the parts, the screws, everything like that. Well, as the years went on and I bought more guns, I started collecting more parts because I truly got into the hobby, and I would replace parts, whatever. Some people go, hey, I've got this gun I don't want, or it's broken, here's the parts. So I would collect them over time. And this was about 9 years ago now when I first got this. So about 2 weeks ago, I bought another set of screws for my Pieta guns because I only needed one replacement screw, but I thought I'll just buy the whole set just in case. You never know. Well, it dawned on me as I'm looking at my parts, I go, I have enough parts to put together a gun. So what I did was I started messing with the mainspring, some were Uberti, Pieta screws, Pieta cylinder, all this. I was like, I have enough to put a gun together. And what happened was my buddy, he had a Griswold Gunnison, same model. He didn't want anymore. So I took it. All the internal parts were ruined and broken, but it still had the barrel and the frame and the grip. So I put this gun together. And if you know anything about Navy Arms Co., a lot of the parts were fitted only for that particular gun. They weren't the best of fitting like Pieta and Uberti. So I had to do some of my own redneck gunsmithing to really get it to work. And I finally got all the parts together. So what is original to mine that started me into the cap and ball revolver era is the loading levers from the original gun, the hammer screw, and the internal parts are from my original gun except for the screws and the mainspring. Everything else is the same for my original gun. Now this barrel is from Navy Arms Co. for a Griswold and Gunnison, but this cylinder is a Pieta cylinder made for the 844 1851 Navies or the 1860 Armies. So I had a spare and I wondered, well, why don't I just throw it on there to see if it will fit? The Navy Arms Co. cylinder was damaged. One chamber was gunked up pretty bad, had some pitting, but I had this cylinder by Pieta as a spare. So I popped it on there because worst case scenario, it didn't fit. It fit, popped the barrel on, put the wedge on, and it is a tight fit. It doesn't move. It goes straight up against that barrel. And it works every time. It is a smooth fit, and it is a tight fit. And that's what I wanted. So I was like, great. So I've got a better cylinder to pop on this gun. So to use the liberal terminology, this is a cap and ball revolver ghost gun, basically, to understand that more. So this is a gun, a Griswold and Gunnison, that I put together with spare parts I'd collected for at least 7 years before the gun, my first one, had actually broke. Hence why the barrel from my buddies, they shot it, let it sit for many years without cleaning it, so it turned brown. That's why the Pieta cylinder's still blued and the barrel's brown. Because of that, it just turned brown with age. So I put this together, and now I have a Griswold and Gunnison pistol that was great for my collection. Now I have that particular model that I've actually wanted just to have in my collection. So it is a 44. It loads up the same way. Put it into half cock. Load up your chambers. I will know the barrel, as you can see where you put a ball in, there's not enough room to put a paper cartridge in. So this gun would mostly have to be for fun, recreational use, maybe hunting, and you'll have to use loose powder and ball. You're not going to be able to get a cartridge in there just from looking at it. But with the pins in the back of the Pieta cylinder, the hammer also had that cutout, and it's going to be hard to see, as you can see, where that slides in there. We've discussed that in other videos. So now you just pull the hammer back, set it between two chambers, and it locks into place. So this gun can have 6 safely loaded like most other Uberti and Pieta reproductions. The original cylinder by Navy Arms Code didn't have that. The other hammer did not have that cutout. So you couldn't really do that safely. Now I can, because the cylinder and the hammer have that kind of going for it. So the mainspring is off my Uberti 1873 Cattleman that I replaced with a lighter mainspring because it was so hard to cock it back. So that was put in there. Pieta screws, because they are the same threading, like on the side here for all the other internal parts. They are the same. So I tried to use as much of the original parts as I could, but some of them I had to replace because the other screws were worn out and just not in the best of shape. Well, so there, I have a gun, fantasy gun, or not a fantasy gun, but a ghost gun. Now, everything here is completely legal. Let me make that clear. Nothing that I've done right here or have talked about is illegal. This is all completely legal. So the original barrel was this one that I got for the original gun. Now, after it had broke, I didn't care to clean it. I let that barrel probably sit for 6 years before I cleaned it. Well, after I cleaned it, the pitting had gotten to the rifling and it wasn't the best of shape. But in the back, it was in relatively good shape. So I decided I'm just going to cut off right where the octagon barrel meets the round barrel, as you can see here. So it goes from octagon to round barrel, just like the original Griswold and Gunnison. So I thought, well, I'll just cut that off, and now I've got a snub nose. Now, I'm not going to be demonstrating me putting it on there because this pin is on there tight. The original pin that came with this frame was so blown to thunder. The barrel was loose because somebody that was shooting this was loading heavy charges through it. So I had to replace it with the Pieta part to make it fit tighter, Pieta wedge. But I've kept the original barrel and made it into a snub nose. As you can see, I filed it off. Now, I have not blued it, but I've polished it and I filed it to make it look nice and pretty. See if y'all can see that. And as you can see, you can kind of see the rifling, decent shape. And now I have a snub nose. So now I have a option of a snub nose Griswold and Gunnison or the full-size barrel. So it's best of both worlds. So I may do a range video over that, me shooting the full-size barrel and the snub nose for YouTube later in the future. Again, this is completely legal. Nothing I did here was illegal. When it comes to these black powder guns, they're considered like a bow, crossbow, sword, knife. They're in that same category. So this is completely legal. The only markings on this particular pistol, and to make sure I say it right, black powder only, made in Italy, 44. That is it. There is actually no serial number on this gun, not on the barrel, not on the frame. So there's no serial number for this gun. Again, completely legal. I did not remove the serial numbers. These parts just didn't come with it. And it is completely legal because in the eyes of the U.S. government, this right here, and like all the others, rifle, shotgun, pistol, revolver, they are considered non-firearms or antique style guns. So the U.S. government doesn't really care about these. So this gun does not have any serial numbers, which I kind of like, gives it that authentic look, other than on the side of the barrel, if y'all can see, where the Navy Arms Co. put their markings. Now, Navy Arms Co. is unfortunately out of business. You can still find these by Navy Arms Co., and I think it's kind of cool because it's an older reproduction that I can keep. And now I have, again, a Griswold and Gunnison. So it's definitely going to stay in my collection. It's got a place in my heart because it's what started it all for me in the cap and ball era of black powder guns. Well, anyway, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It was more over the gun in my experience, what it got me into. And that's about it. I'm about to run out of time, guys. Again, look for this on YouTube in the coming weeks or months. And remember, I'm the Musket Man. Keep your powder dry. We'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, Colin Elam again, aka the Musket Man, and I am back for another episode of Gun Table Talk, but this is going to be the part 2 to the Griswold and Gunnison. I ran out of time. I'm still doing 15-minute videos, so I can still post them on Instagram, but they're long enough that I can post them on YouTube. So this is going to be a part 2 of the Griswold and Gunnison cap and ball revolver. In the first part of the episode, I talk more about my history with the gun, how this particular revolver was the one that got me started into cap and ball revolvers and other black powder pistols as well. This was the gun that started it all. So now in this part 2 episode, I've kind of educated myself a little bit on the history, not to a fine detail, but enough that I would like to share you more about the history of the Griswold and Gunnison and some differences they might have from other cap and ball revolvers, stuff like that. And right off the bat, as you can see, this is not like the part 1. Sorry for the lighting. I don't know why it's so dark. I'll try to fix that. But this is a snub nose versus the full-size barrel. So that's a little bit different than the first video. And if I've got enough time at the end, I will be going over that, why I did that. So also, here's the loading lever that I'm using as the pistol stand. So if you're wondering, again, I will go over that shortly. So anyway, guys, thanks for joining me in another episode of Gun Table Talk, and let's go over more of the history of the Griswold and Gunnison cap and ball revolver. So anyway, guys, we've talked about other cap and ball revolvers and the differences that are all between them all and stuff like that, calibers, differences, things like that. Well, the Griswold and Gunnison is considered the Confederate pistol or the Confederate revolver. Well, most of the time when you hear that, you think of the LeMat, the 9-shot revolver, or the grape shot revolver. Well, you would be correct. But this, and there's others as well, but the Griswold and Gunnison was the main Confederacy sidearm that was manufactured in the Confederacy. Now, a lot of you are probably going, well, Southern gun, there's no way it lasted very long. It probably had limited production, you know, yada, yada, yada. Well, you would typically think right to think like that. But actually, the Griswold andGunnisons did very well in the South. About 3,700 were produced before the factory was burned down. So anyway, again, I don't know in fine detail the history, but this is my version of it. If you want to get more information, there's always, you know, you can look it up, but I recommend ForgottenWeapons.com. Their YouTube channel goes over the Griswold and Gunnison in more finer detail than what I'm going to do. There's also Mike Bellevue and others that have done that, so go check them out if you want to learn their opinion and their history side to get a, you know, a difference from mine, I guess. So anyway, Griswold was a gentleman that was an entrepreneur that was known for selling stuff and was also famous for the cotton gin, which was very important in the South. He came to the South in around the 1820s, so he had been there quite a while, and he had a lot of money. He was making a big name for himself in the area. Now, when the war broke out in 1861, he wanted to do something to help the war effort. Well, he got with a gentleman that was named of Gunnison, last name, and he had experience making handguns. So he got with Griswold, and they basically came together and turned his cotton gin into an arms factory. Now, when they first started making weapons, actually, they made pikes, believe it or not. Yeah, like the medieval weapons, pikes, like that you would see in the old movies, like knights and all that. The Confederate government was looking for some, so they manufactured that. Well, if you weld like me or, you know, some basic blacksmithing, pike's not too hard to make. But they wanted to move on to revolvers. And as you can see by looking at it, hopefully the lighting's not too dark. And there's a side comparison of what the barrel looks like. So the shank of the barrel is about an octagon that goes to round. So it does look like a Colt Dragoon from the Dragoon series or even the Walkers. So it does have the distinct look about it. So with these, the original caliber was 36, not 44. This one is a 44, so it kind of goes into my fantasy gun video. It is a Griswold and Gunnison, but it's not technically the true caliber. So by that time, they had made the pikes. They came in and started making revolvers. Well, a lot of people know the Griswold and Gunnison for being brass frame revolvers. Well, that is correct. Back then, certain items like steel were very hard to get into the South. So the next best option and cheaper option would have been brass. So pretty much all of them that you would have seen would have been brass. And I believe it wouldn't have been uncommon to see some take on a copper pink-like look because I believe the zinc shortage was another thing that they couldn't put into the steel. That was a shortage back in the South during the war. So that is also what I've been told. As you can see, this one's kind of, the brass has become tarnished, kind of brown because it's been used. So when they started making these, they would have, typically the cylinders would have been made out of cast iron, not steel, surprisingly. And a lot of the barrels were that way as well. And the major differences between a Colt, one of them, starting off, was the grip. Now, again, sorry about the lighting, but if you can see on the grip, it's kind of got a bend to it versus a Colt where it's more of a straight, flat down grip. This one bends out like someone's been hitting it with a hammer or doing some work on it to bend it out. That was actually the design on the grip to the Griswold and Gunnison. And actually what I like about that, it allows me to grab that hammer just a little bit better versus a Colt where you kind of have to move your thumb up to get it. This one kind of helps you a little bit, and I'm sure it did with the originals compared to a Colt. Now, anybody knows Colt, he was the first one to basically produce guns where the parts were interchangeable. So you could get interchangeable parts to put in your gun if they broke or wore out, whatever. Well, Griswold and Gunnison, not really. They were hand-fitted guns. So it's not like every single part fit in perfectly and it was ready to go. No, usually they took filing and all that good stuff to get it working again, which even with this one being a reproduction, some parts I've had to file to get to work versus a Pieta or a Uberti or a Gen 2 Colt. So it's kind of the same on the reproductions as well. What are some other major differences? I'm trying to think, 'cause there's a lot. Also, there is no capping groove where you put your cap on. And a lot of the 1851 Navies and the 1860 Armies had that little groove that goes right down the middle that would assist you to put a cap on. These do not have it, and the originals would have not had it as well. So that's one difference you have right there. The shank of the barrel, as you can see, is an octagon barrel. The early models were actually round shanks to round barrel. And I believe it was about halfway through production that they changed that to the octagon barrels to round barrels, which, again, is not an uncommon look to other pistols that you would have seen in history. And here's another example, as you can see. Just like a Dragoon or a Walker, it does give off that look, and that's also correct. Compared to Colts, they actually worked very well. They got them to the Confederate government and the Army on time. They were known for their quality back then, which in the South, you know, you're trying to just get whatever you can. People are just throwing guns together. So the quality might have not been as good. So the Griswold and Gunnisons were actually decent quality. And when you find originals today, depending on how well they were used, they're in pretty dang decent shape. And so it's not like they were just thrown out there. But the Confederacy just needed an arm that they could get besides, you know, the LeMat. Like I was saying earlier about the brass frames, pretty much all of them were brass. From what I know, there's only been one recording, at least from what I've researched and seen, that the frame was actually cast iron, which is kind of insane. But at the site where the factory was burned down, according to what I've been told, they have found other iron frames, but they've pretty much only found one that was a completed iron frame gun, which would have been very odd for the time, and just because of what metal it is, would have been a little weird. So I'm sure the guys in the Army that were okaying these guns were going, cast iron? Well, all right, we'll give it a try. But back then, you just kind of had to do what you had to do. Loading is the exact same as any Colt or any other black powder cap and ball gun. Like I was saying, this one's a 44. Originals would have been in 36, but they load up the same exact way. These can take paper cartridges. At least these could. I did try to do some of my paper cartridges. I said in my last video that they couldn't, or this particular gun could. I actually found out, yes, it can. This gun is good enough that I could put a round ball paper cartridge into the gun. Now, with originals or other guns, that might change. It might change a little bit. But as far as the history goes, about 3700 May, the factory was burned down, and that was it of Griswold and Gunnison. That's pretty much all there is to say about it. Now, it goes into greater detail with some other YouTubers and historians. I'm just going over the basic knowledge that I know about this gun. Well, I've got about 5 minutes left, so I thought I would just go over the snub nose Griswold and Gunnison versus it being a full size. So right off the bat, if you saw my part 1 video, I was actually going to go to the range and do a video with it. So I thought I would load it up with the paper cartridges, which is how I found out it does take the paper cartridges. So that is from some information in the first part I was actually wrong about. Round ball paper cartridges, not bullets. When I loaded them up, it loaded, but this barrel moved up about 1/8 of an inch away from the frame. Well, that's not good. So technically the pistol still would have fired, but all your gas would have escaped, and that's kind of dangerous because you're not going to be accurate. It's going to be poor quality. It's not going to work very well. So couldn't go out and shoot it. So I loaded up the rest of the cylinder, and then I put it on my 1860 Army for my 1860 Army video and just used that loaded cylinder to go shoot. Well, I still had my snub nose, which y'all saw in the first video, and I thought, why not put that on to make sure it's not the same problem? Well, this one is completely stiff. It is tight on there. It did not move at all. This one I can move. The snub nose I can't. So like I mentioned in the last video, this snub nose came off of another Griswold and Gunnison I had that was imported by Navy Arms Co. Let the barrel sit for a long time because I had no gun to put it on, and the barrel had just been completely pitted. Well, the last about 2 inches, I cut it right at the shank. That rifling was still good. So I thought I'll just lop off the barrel and make me a snub nose, and then I had some bluing. I polished it, re-blued it, and now I've got a Griswold and Gunnison Confederate pistol that is a snub nose. So kind of cool, not bad. It definitely made for a fun project. A lot of the parts are from Pieta. I know the cylinder is. Some of the parts inside are from Pieta, Navy Arms Co., just all a bunch of parts thrown together. But I finally got one that works, and now I've got a snub nose cap and ball revolver. Now some of you are probably going, now Colin, how do you load this thing? Well, if you own a snub nose cap and ball revolver, whether it's Pieta or Uberti, they typically send you that loading lever that's a brass rod that you have to palm to load a ball into the cylinder. Well, it works, but it is very hard. So what I did, and I have 2 more spare loading levers, so what I did is I cut the latch off of this loading lever because you don't need it on the snub nose, and I've got more in the back, so it's not like I just ruined this part. But it will, when I take the screw out, I can still install it, and I'll just show you where it goes normally if the gun was a full-size barrel. So to load it, I just pop the screw in, load all 6 chambers, and you simply take the loading lever off for shooting because this is more of a belly gun, concealed carry gun, just something fun. It's also a fantasy gun because technically the 44 version didn't exist. It would have been the 36 cal. So that's also something really cool about it. It was made out of old parts, like I've said in the first one that I manufactured together. So that's pretty cool. I have not gone out and shot this Griswold and Gunnison snub nose yet. And it will be the first time I've fired a Griswold and Gunnison model in a long time, about 9 to nearly 10 years. So I'm excited to get this out on the range when we have better weather and less wind. I will definitely record that to put on YouTube as well. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure to look out for that because that's pretty cool. I think it's going to be interesting. Well, guys, I'm about to run out of time. If you enjoyed this part 2 of more of the history, quick history over the Griswold and Gunnison, if you feel like I left any information out or got any correct, please let me know down in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe to this channel. Like I said, leave comments. I appreciate it all the time. And thanks for joining me in another episode of Gun Table Talk. Anyway, guys, I'm the Musket Man. Keep your powder dry. We'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for watching.